It is one of the world's most remote and unforgiving environments. But for a few days, the fragile beauty of the Arctic ice played host to a handful of adventurers, determined not just to reach the North Pole, but to run a marathon there as well. It was a quest that produced emotions every bit as extreme as the landscape.
Very beautiful, very cold, very nice.
I felt absolutely awful.
This is the story of their journey to the top of the world. Finding a suitable place to train for such an occasion presents its own specific challenges. Ted Jackson found the answer in the deep freeze of his local butchers in southern England.
To be honest, no one's that surprised. I think I've got a bit of a reputation for doing silly things, and this is just another one on a long list.
Ever seen a man running around in your fridge before?
Well, I run around in there sometimes when things get a bit busy, but we didn't have a guy with goggles and a hat doing it before, but it's the sort of thing would Ted do. Can I borrow your fridge for a couple of hours? No problem at all.
At his own confession, Ted isn't a natural athlete.
I find myself a new Achilles tendon here.
But it's a detail that hasn't curtailed his sporting ambition. 2 years ago, he cycled all 21 stages of the Tour de France, and over the next few years, he hopes to run a marathon on every continent.
The first marathon I ever did was the New York Marathon, and that was tough. It was hot, and I did it in just under 5 hours. And then I did the London Marathon last year, just under 5 hours. They're all fine up until 20 miles, and then after that, it's hell. This one, I imagine, will be hell from mile 1 or 2, and we'll see where we go. I haven't got a clue.
ALISON GILL is a slightly more serious athlete. The former rower represented Great Britain at 3 Olympic Games. But for partner Steve BICKNELL, the North Pole will be the venue of his first ever marathon. The Oxfordshire towpath they've trained on will soon be a distant memory.
When you've been to the Olympics, I think once you stop, you start looking for ways to keep yourself fit and healthy. And what I discovered was that challenge is the thing that really excites me and keeps me interested. So every year, or every other year at least, I look for something different to do that's just going to push the boundaries a bit, and the North Pole seemed like a bit of an adventure.
I don't really like marathon running, and I figured I'm only ever going to do one marathon, and if I'm going to do one marathon, it might as well be somewhere really cold. So the coolest marathon in the world, apparently.
I think it's very easy for people to think that these sort of adventures only attract slightly mad people, but actually you meet people from all walks of life, and that's the kind of nice thing about it in a way.
It's now just a few days before the 2008 race. Base camp is on the island of Spitsbergen, part of the SVALBARD region of Norway and some 600 kilometres north of the mainland. The North Pole is still more than 1,000 kilometres away, but already the temperature is down to minus 20 degrees Celsius. This is a land where summer lakes freeze into winter boatyards. For this year's marathon field, nature is providing a crash course in the realities of trying to fulfill their Arctic ambition. Richard Donovan is the event's organiser. The Irishman has run distance races all over the world. He won the first ever South Pole Marathon in 2002, and later that year became the first man to complete the same distance at the North Pole.
First of all, they're running on water effectively. There's no land whatsoever, so they're running on the Arctic Ocean, 6 to 12 feet of ice, and underneath them is 12,000 feet of ocean, so it's a scary experience for people. Many of them will never have experienced temperatures of minus 25, minus 30, and the good thing about Spitsbergen is they're experiencing that right now. They're experiencing minus 20. They tend to be a little bit driven, want to do something different. Many of the guys here have run marathons on every continent. There's a guy in the race field who's run almost 300 marathons, so you can get that kind of experience, but there are 3 or 4 people in the race field who are making their marathon debut up here.
I think most people who know where it is think you're a bit mad in the head. You've kind of lost the plot. But once they get beyond that, then they get very interested. You know, it's a very fascinating place. There's a lot of mystique about the North Pole, a lot of adventures. the cold, top of the earth. So there's a lot of interest back home, and people get quite excited, but they do think you're quite off the square.
I like running. I like snow and ice and the nature up there. I wanted to see that. And I had just turned 40 and had my 4th child. So I thought, this is a challenge. Can I get in shape to do this? So I've prepared myself for a whole year.
I am a bit fear of going there, of ice bears and polar bears and maybe a big hole in the ice and they're going to disappear in that.
Training in these conditions is far from easy. Svalbard has one of the most hostile environments on the planet. 2/3 of its surface is covered by glaciers, the soil is frozen up to a depth of 500 metres, and the runners also have a chance of an unscheduled meeting with one of these chaps.
Right here we're in Longyearbyen, and it's a small settlement, and polar bears on the island of Spitsbergen outnumber people by a long way. I think 1/4 of the world's polar bears live in the area of Svalbard, in which Spitsbergen is one of the islands. And you have to be very careful. You can't go outside of town without carrying a weapon.
The prospect of a close encounter with a polar bear is unlikely to faze this man. Finally released from the confines of an English freezer, Ted seems very at home on the Norwegian ice. Now we've got a stuffed polar bear behind you here. How would you feel about one of those popping up on the horizon during the race?
I've got absolutely no worries about that. We've been told by Richard Donovan, the race director, we've got a procedure that we have to follow, and that is bend, turn and shoot. It's very simple.
So you'll be carrying a gun during the race?
No, I won't. But, in theory, that'll be a good thing. But I do believe that the Russians have got some guns up there just in case.
People still alive there?
The runners are reliant on some friendly Russians to get them to the start line. Direct from Arctic Explorer Central Casting is Viktor Boyarsky. He's organising their flight from Spitsbergen to the BYEONG camp, which is a few kilometres away from the pole. Work on the ice runway there is behind schedule, so for now the race is delayed.
I think I will get the news. Everybody have a small panic, because I come up here Saturday. I am waiting 6 days for this race. So now it's enough waiting. I want to run and be finished and go home to my wife and my children.
More positively, the hold-up has at least given the runners time to acclimatise. Many are here to complete this sports version of the Grand Slam, finishing a marathon on all of the world's 7 continents and the North Pole.
Marathon is a nice way to get up there and to do it and to have done it and to be able to say I've done it, but it's really the trip to get there and to stand at the pole. That's the exciting part, and the camaraderie of the group.
Not a lot of people have been there in the first place. I mean, it's easy to fly there, so we couldn't claim credit for that, but I think it's a very sort of particular thing, especially because the ice getting smaller and smaller, so I'm not sure how long you can do that.
While for some this is a race just to be run, for others it's a race to be won. 2 years ago, South Korea's An Byung-sik won a 250-kilometre event in China's Gobi Desert, and he's one of the favourites to do well here.
I
like being in extreme environments, so I was looking for a different experience. By running at the North Pole, I will get to see a new landscape, and in the meantime, I'm making many new friends.
The days of waiting have at least given everyone plenty of time to practice possible victory celebrations and to give the local energy drinks a thorough road testing. But at last, the news everyone has been waiting for arrives.
Yeah, we're leaving tomorrow, alright, that's the plan.
The Arctic runway is ready, the North Pole is now just a 2-hour flight away.
Something happens every year. This is the first time there's been a delay in the history of the race. This is year. It'll turn out to be quite dramatic to be racing up there, getting it done and coming back. And you'll have memories for a lifetime.
A few hours later, and the runners are heading away from a Spitsbergen night towards the continuous daylight of springtime at the North Pole.
Well, we're almost a week late, but we are now finally leaving. And unlike London Heathrow's Terminal 5, which has no excuses, I guess Arctic travel timetables are nothing if not approximate. Behind me here is the rather elderly Russian jet that's going to take us to the pole, Let's just hope that runway that's been cut into the ice for us is now going to be long enough.
Coming up, the North Pole Marathon gets underway at last. Ted's freezer-based training plan is put to the test.
It's never hurt this much before.
And organisers battle to prevent the race from descending into chaos.